Hello everyone, welcome back to our House Call series, From Confusion to Clarity. We're continuing our conversation on Follow the Science. Hi Barry, welcome back.
Thanks, Paula.
Let's pick up where we left off at the last video, where we were talking about Follow the Science. So we've heard that phrase, Follow the Science, used throughout the pandemic for over 20 some months now. Mm-hmm. You know, it's been used to justify all of the measures that's in place that the government is using in public health. But in order to first understand Follow the Science, we need to explore what that phrase means, right? And so what exactly is science, and what exactly is it that we're following? Like, for example, we often have this mistaken impression that science is simply knowledge. But is that true?
Well, agreed, Paula. People often think that science is simply a body of knowledge.
Yes.
And it is true that the scientific process can produce knowledge in the same way that philosophical discourse can produce knowledge and spiritual reflection can produce knowledge. But science in itself is actually more a process of discovery than about the knowledge that it discovers itself.
Okay.
It's deeper than that. It's about trying to understand the universe around us. If we have knowledge, that can be very helpful. But if we really understand the universe around us, it explains the universe better to us. It allows us to make better predictions. It's more powerful than just a body of knowledge. And my concern has been that we haven't actually been doing the scientific process or following the science throughout the pandemic as well as we could have.
Mm-hmm. Oh, excuse me. So I was thinking, so what is the scientific process exactly then? Like, do you have an example of how science works? And what is it that it can provide for us?
Well, first and foremost, when we start doing a scientific process, we accept the fact that at the present time, we have a certain interpretation or perspective on the universe. We have intrinsic to the way we look at the universe, a certain theory that we're looking through.
Yes.
And we have to accept that because of that, we don't know all there is to know, that we can do better. And we do that by asking questions and critiquing what we think we already know to be true. And if we cannot admit that we don't know something, if we can't admit that we could be wrong, then right off the bat, we're not starting off as scientists. I mean, Galileo used a different lens to look at the universe than the prevailing theories at the time. He thought that it made a lot more sense, it explained things a lot better and made better predictions if we instead thought that the Earth went around the Sun than the Sun went around the Earth. Rather than trying to make the data fit the lens, he made the lens fit the data. And by doing so, he was able to make better explanations of what he saw and make better predictions. It was a more powerful theory. So the scientific process really starts with a theory, we critique it, and then we have a better theory, which we then test. So it's really critique, conjecture, test. Galileo, however, paid a big price for doing that process. He was imprisoned under house arrest for the rest of his life, and he only escaped being burned at the stake because he was so popular at the time, because many people who disagree with the prevailing narrative of the Earth being the center of the universe lost their lives for believing so.
You know, Galileo's reference in history is playing itself out again right now in present day. Like, we know that many people have been reluctant to ask questions or criticize present theories, but there are some professionals that are speaking out and they're questioning things. But these professionals are being silenced in this cancel culture, and many of them are being persecuted, similar in a way to what happened to Galileo, but in a modern day approach. You know, that doesn't sound very scientific to me when you've got a professional speaking out and they're canceled. Like, how do we advance if we can't ask questions?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it's interesting because I think there's a sense out there that science is about being very confident. But the truth is, the fundamental approach in science is one of great humility. We have to admit that we don't know all there is to know and that we can do better. If we're open-minded, even open to contradictory perspectives, then we will welcome criticism, we will welcome questioning. And when we do that, it allows us the ability to be able to balance our intrinsic and unavoidable biases when we look at the universe. If we view the world in a smugly self-satisfied way that we know all there is to know, you can be absolutely sure that we are not doing science. Aldous Huxley, the famous English writer, said, "Science has explained nothing. The more we know, the more fantastic the world becomes, and the profounder the surrounding darkness." So pretending that we know all there is to know, or more than we think we know, may allay anxiety and fear, but it is the absolute opposite of actually doing science.
You know, my husband and I watched Quest for Fire recently, and if you think about back to caveman days, and literal, just as a comparison, if they didn't stop to question things, where would we be today, right? And so, you know, we think it's less scary to believe that scientists have all the answers and that doctors will cure all illness and disease, right? And so it seems to me that when we do science really well, we realize how much we did not know, and so that it always so allows us to ask more questions, and so that we can then test that, and then we can, you know, form a better understanding going forward. To me, it's always a process of questioning, testing it. Are we right? Are we wrong? You know, and it does allow us to, like you say, have a deeper understanding of the universe if we're humble. Like if we test something and if it's not right, we re-examine it, and is it not like a one step forward, one step back? Always move, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're always moving forward in science.
Well, we hope to. I mean, certainly we have to avoid the binary thinking. We have to be courageous enough to be creative and think outside the box, as we say. And remember that box we're thinking out of, we built that box.
Yeah.
It didn't just happen. We built that box. We have to learn to think outside of the box we've imposed on ourselves.
Yeah.
So we have to accept that we do not know what we do not know. But the hope is that we're using the scientific process, we can help with learning what we do not know that we do not know.
So follow the science, in essence, should really mean following the process of discovery, right? By questioning what we believe to be true, and then coming up with better explanations, and then questioning those, and then testing them, right, to find out if it's true. You know, and Einstein has a great quote, and I hope I can get this right. I think he said something to the effect that if you know your outcome of your process, you're doing engineering. You're not doing science.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a temptation for people to think that during the pandemic, science is about following a cookbook.
Yes.
But there is no cookbook, right? I mean, we all have biases, even the experts, and the sooner we accept that unavoidable fact and be open to even contrary perspectives, then we can avoid the trap of our own biases. Otherwise, we'll only ever see what we already believe, and then we really can't advance very much.
You know, many of us, this is the first time that we've lived through a pandemic, and there's much of what we don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know. But having this conversation, we now really understand that we must not be doing engineering. We must follow the science and
Yeah, I think a good example would be the border closure between Gatineau and Ottawa.
Okay.
And so for some of our viewers may not realize there's a huge flow of traffic between Gatineau and Ottawa in terms of people working in one city or the other, the flow of goods and services across the border, families, friends, etc. that cross the border all the time. And yet, early on in the pandemic, it was decided that they would close that border, which cost a lot of money. It was very inconvenient for people working on the other side of the border, for visiting friends and family, etc. And yet it was never explained to us, what is the goal of doing so? What are we hoping this will accomplish? We didn't see any evidence of what that would be. We didn't know how long the border would be closed for. There was no sense that they were going to be monitoring whether or not the outcome was what we hoped it would be by closing the border. There was no transparency at the end of the border closure to tell us, yes, it was worth all the hassle and expense, or it wasn't. So we could have done science during the process. We could have been transparent in an ethical fashion, but we weren't. But we did that a second time, months later, again, lacking transparency and lacking the medical science. They kept changing the goalposts, which we all found kind of frustrating. I mean, I can live with being told to give up my freedoms, provided that people give me a sound rationale in a transparent way for why I'm giving up those freedoms. But I'm not going to accept them unless there's a scientific process that's ethically done and follows common sense. And that often didn't happen with this. One thing I'll tell you is, as much as I'll accept my freedoms being curtailed for good reason, I will never ever accept being treated like a mindless sheep.
You know, many of the measures in the pandemic have not been scientific or transparent. And so that's why we're doing this Follow the Science segment right now. Let's pick this up because this is a long conversation, and we'll dive into more details and examples on the next video. Thanks for sharing that example about Gatineau and Ottawa. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Paula.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.